So this is CNIT 40. Let me bring it up here. DNS Security. It is a specialty part of security, but it's a very important part of the infrastructure. There's a book, and there are quizzes, and there's projects due. They're all hands-on projects, and you turn them in by email. Attendance is not required. Hopefully you will find some benefit in coming to class, but if you prefer not to for any reason, there's a live stream coming from the college, and there will be videos posted on YouTube, so you can view these lectures later. And in fact, there are last videos from a previous semester on my webpage and old, so you can watch video lectures if you want to. You don't get points for showing up or lose points for not showing up. The grade comes entirely from quizzes and projects. But anyway, here's the description of what we're going to cover. DNS is the domain name system. Every time you use the internet, you use alphabetical domain names, which are turned into IP addresses by a network of computers, which would be a simple and unimportant thing, but it turns out to be subject to a lot of attacks. And those attacks foul up resolution and can even lead to you going to the wrong site. So we'll talk about how DNS works. You will set up a DNS server on Linux and on Windows, and you will then perform attacks against them and see how to defend them from these attacks. And then we'll talk about the advanced security features that are just beginning to be deployed, such as DNS Sec, to try to prevent these attacks. So there's the textbook. It's only available on Amazon. The paper copy costs $700. I don't recommend buying it. The electronic copy is like 10 bucks or something, so that's what I use. The quizzes are multiple choice, online, open book, and you do them before the lecture on that chapter. So you have 2 chances to do them, and the higher chance wins. You take them at the City College online class link. I used to have quizzes in class, which are probably more an accurate measure of performance, but the purpose of these quizzes is just to encourage people to study. So before class, read the chapter and take the quiz. All right, and so this class is a 1-unit class, so it doesn't really meet that often. It meets about every 3 weeks on this schedule. And the projects aren't due until the next class. The add date is 9/11, so you can add today, and in principle, people could add in the intervening time if they email me or see me at some other class. And then we'll have everybody in the class that's in there. So on 9/12, you have to take 2 quizzes online before you show up, and there's a project due by the end of class. If you missed the deadline for quizzes, let me know, and I'll figure out what to do. If you are, of course, sick or something, then I'll extend deadlines as needed. If you're turning in homework, get it in on time. If it's less than 2 weeks late, I may take 5 points off. And you typically take 5 points off for being up to 2 weeks late, and then it's worth nothing after that. I'll see how the semester proceeds. Sometimes I have a more lenient late policy on these short-term classes, but I have to encourage people to keep moving. If everybody puts everything off till the last week, it's not really good for them. So I have some encouragement to do things on time. So there's a bunch of projects and a final exam and a bunch of quizzes, which are missing from my total here. Sorry about that. I'll add them. And that gives you some points. 90% is an A, 80% is B, and so on. The final exam meets here. You do not really have to take the final exam. One thing a lot of my students prefer to do is to do extra projects. That's fine with me. Most of us care more about the hands-on stuff than the book learning stuff. And I think that's fine. So you see, here's the required projects, and there's a bunch of extra credit projects you can do. And if you do enough of them and you do the quizzes, you probably will have enough points to get an A without taking the final, which is fine. But you certainly can take the final if you want to, either because you haven't done enough projects or just because you like to finish things, and that's fine. It's just points like anything else. You have to turn in projects. If people are cheating and copying other people's work, they'll probably get thrown out of the class. Please don't do that nonsense. Hopefully we don't have that to deal with. But it does come up now and then. The lab is a deliberately unsafe environment. If you work on campus in the hacking lab, be aware that all the hacking students and forensic students, who are by far the most dangerous, are working in that lab, and they can steal passwords off the machines. So don't do personal emailing or shopping or anything in there. But there are machines there. If you, for some reason, do not want to do the homework on your own machines, you can use the machines there. The homework in this class is pretty harmless. You'll use virtual machines. You aren't playing with real malware or doing any dangerous attacks against your own systems, probably. So it's probably pretty easy to do this even on a machine that you treasure. But anyway, if you prefer to use the computer here for any reason, you can. And if anybody needs any accommodation for any disability or anything, let me know. We can help with that. Yeah.
Are you using VMware?
Yeah, but you can also use VirtualBox. And you could even use a couple of real PCs if you want to, but that's a lot of work. I recommend VMware VirtualBox.
Preferred operating system?
Doesn't matter. If you have Windows, VMware Player is free. If you have the Mac, VMware costs money. You only get a 30-day free trial. Hopefully we will get free copies of VMware software for the students this semester, but that hasn't happened yet. They're arguing about how to pay for it, but we're hoping to pay the fee and become a VMware Academy, and then you'll get free copies of VMware Fusion and VMware Workstation, which is fine, but some people prefer to use VirtualBox, which is completely free, and that's an option. There are VirtualBox images of the virtual machines. These are good questions. Any others? Yeah?
I have a free copy of Parallels. Is that acceptable as well?
Parallels, my understanding of Parallels is you have to reboot the machine and you get just one OS. Oh, it opens up a window? Then it should be fine. I've never used it. Sure. As long as you can open two machines at the same time, I guess it's all right. I've never used it, but that should be fine. There are other ones like Zen and stuff. If you know how to use them, good luck. The only ones I know how to use are VMware and VirtualBox, but there are a bunch of virtualization clients like Hyper-V and stuff, and they're all fine. We're just going to use a standard Windows Server 2008 to do the Windows part, and a Kali Linux to do the Linux part, which is the standard pen testing Linux distribution. And you can use some other version of Linux if you want to, but just means my instructions won't work. Yeah?
The approximate size of the virtual hard drives?
The Windows Server 2008 is about 5 gigs, and the Kali is about the same. Yes, they're not that big. And we're not going to be installing any big, heavy software packages on them. We're just going to make standard DNS servers and then run standard tools to attack them. They're all good questions. All right. So as I mentioned before, I forgot to account for the quizzes in my list here. So the total number of points is going to be more, like maybe 300. I'll update this and let you know as you go ahead. But whatever the total points are, 90% is all you need to get an A. All right. So that's the grading and the general structure of the class and the deadlines. If you came to add, everybody can add. I'll put up the ad codes later when we take a break. I think now I'll just get started with the first chapter, which should work on this machine because they put a Mac in here. Last semester it was a PC, and that really cramped my style. I'm glad we have a Mac in here now. So, all right. So why does DNS matter? Because humans don't like remembering IP addresses, especially IP version 6 addresses, which are becoming more popular. Those things are really hard to remember. So they want to remember things like ccsf.edu. So every time you or any software on your machine refers to something by that kind of domain name, it has to first look up the IP address before it can send any traffic to it. And it may seem like you wouldn't have to use domain names for automatic processes like updates, but in fact, everybody does, because if you are, say, Microsoft.com, it is possible and quite common that for some reason you decide to move your space to a different server. And therefore, you want people to just connect by the domain name and look up the IP address so you can update the directory information instead of having to update the software every time you move something to a new server. So even automatic processes typically use DNS, domain name system, and use alphabetic domain names. So the problem is the DNS network itself, since it's critical to the internet, it is subject to attacks. People would like to bring down a company or indeed the whole internet by attacking it for various reasons. And then DNS can be used to conceal attacks or to make attacks stronger. And conversely, you can use DNS to protect networks. By monitoring DNS traffic, you can find out if machines are infected and if certain kinds of attacks are happening, and indeed if people are visiting inappropriate websites. And that gets us down to the fundamental design problems of DNS. DNS is one of the original internet protocols, and it was designed in an old time before anybody thought about privacy or security. They were just happy to make it work at all. So it continues to run in a way that does not protect you from forgery or snooping on what you're doing at all. So DNS servers have been attacked many times. In 2001, Microsoft was knocked off the web by an attack on their DNS servers. If you take down Microsoft's DNS server, then people that try to go to a page like www.microsoft.com will ask Microsoft server, what's the IP address? And they won't get an answer, so Microsoft will effectively be offline. Even if the server's running, none of the traffic can find it. Now that was possible because Microsoft had a single point of failure on their network at that time. All the traffic went through one switch. So you could overwhelm that one switch with traffic, and that caused them to go offline. This is why a lot of companies wised up around this time, and they quit having a single point of failure like that. Yeah?
Is that like a DDoS?
Yes. It could be a DDoS or even a single point DOS. A DDoS is many machines attacking, and a DOS is one machine attacking, it could be either one. At this time, I bet it was probably a single attacker. So Akamai had another attack here, an attack in 2004, blacked out a bunch of machines, and this one was a botnet, a DDoS, like she said. Many machines attacking all at once, which are coming into vogue then. In 2002, someone tried to take down the entire internet by taking out the DNS root. Now, the DNS root is the heart of the entire DNS tree. We'll go to it in more detail, but if you have an address that ends in like .com, you have to go to .dot to find out where the .com is, ultimately to find out where any of the servers are. And the root is a cluster of 13 servers, and people have tried several times to take down the entire root. And this was one attack with 900 megabits per second of ICMP traffic. They tried to bring it down, and they did not bring it down. The root of DNS has never been brought down by any attack, although people have tried. Yeah?
Do different countries have different roots?
Different what?
Does America, like, say, have, like, one root and then another country has another?
Oh, yes. So that question is, does America have one root and other countries have another? This is a really important question. Unfortunately, there is one root and America controls it. All DNS in the world is controlled by America. And so everybody's website passes through us. And unfortunately, America has not been a responsible steward of the global roots. We have gone so far as to take French customers who download stuff from a French server that is legal in France and try to charge them with a crime because they violated American copyright law, claiming that America's law applied because the DNS traffic passed through America, like all DNS traffic in the world does. So we have claimed to own the entire world because we own DNS. And this has made privacy advocates and European patriots so angry that they have talked about making a second DNS that's not under American control, but that has not happened yet. Everybody is just using the old one and accepting it, but technically it's a big problem. Yeah?
Does this have to do with the fact that Google was fined ridiculous amounts by the European Union?
As far as I know, that was a different issue. That was like their own infringement of patents or something. But it certainly is the case that there's a lot of unease about America's dominance of the internet. Like right now, there's a thing called safe harbor. See, European privacy laws are much stricter than American privacy laws. So it is, in fact, and another big issue is if a European uses an American server like Google or Yahoo, they have no privacy rights here at all. The government can totally inspect all their traffic without a search warrant, without notifying them, and that totally violates European privacy laws. So it is a violation of European privacy laws for any company in Europe to use American services like Google and Yahoo and Microsoft, and yet they offer such great service at such a low price that they all do it. So they had a special exception added called the Safe Harbor Law for several years that gave some legal cover to European businesses using American servers, and it expired, and some weakened version of it came afterwards. The legal status of this is quite unclear. Last I heard, I read that it was technically illegal what's happening now as European companies use American servers. It's just violating European privacy law, and nobody is taking legal action because nobody knows what else they can do. And again, there's people like Mikko Hyppönen who strongly feels that Europe should unite and form alternative services that are not dependent on America. But it hasn't happened yet because it's a huge investment, and the American services are working well enough for most people. They just accept the privacy risks. Yeah?
What about American multinational corporations that have offices throughout Europe and Asia, but they're an American company?
Yeah. The question is about multinational corporations that are based in America but have offices elsewhere. This is, again, a huge issue. The government tried to force Microsoft to hand over data on an Irish server to America, and I believe they ultimately did have to hand it over, but there are huge arguments about this. And if you get into things like Bitcoin, there is incredible trouble. Where exactly is something that lives only on the internet? Which jurisdiction is it in? What laws must it obey? There's a whole lot of confusing cases. Yeah?
Does this also have something to do with the reason why China has banned WhatsApp and Russia's banned Facebook?
Those are...
They had their own servers, would they have still been inclined to do so?
Yeah, you said, why did Russia ban WhatsApp and China ban...
China banned WhatsApp
and Russia banned Facebook. I know each nation has their own laws. And here's the nasty truth. Nobody wants free speech. No nation on earth wants free speech. In Thailand, they don't want you insulting the king. In Russia, they don't want you having certain political discussions. In China, they don't want you exposing government corruption or plotting against the government. And in America, they don't want you making unauthorized copies of copyrighted works. And in the Arab world, they don't want you insulting Mohammed. Everybody wants to censor the internet, but they have different rules. So there's just a mess of firewalls and filters and blocks and then VPNs and ways to get around it. And everybody's screaming and yelling. So I think there's no simple answer. But it turns out that a lot of what's on the internet is fantastically offensive to various nations in different ways. And they all make some attempt to block it. Yeah.
I meant to revise my question.
Yeah.
Did Russia have the ability to ban Facebook and China have the ability to ban WhatsApp based on the fact that the servers are located in America?
That's a very good point. You guys should come in and find seats. I wouldn't stand up. There's one there, and there's one in the middle back there. Anyway, you're asking whether the other nations have the ability to ban it, and I would say they legally have the ability. As far as technical ability to ban sites, that depends on how their network is structured. I know China has all traffic go through one point, and they have the Great Firewall there, so they have carefully made it possible for them to censor the internet. However, the Great Firewall is a very gentle censor. It does not break connections by black holing them. It breaks connections by sending unexpected reset packets back to it. So when you go to Google, you send a SYN, Google sends a SYN ACK, you then send an ACK, and the Great Firewall sends a reset. Oh no, they decided not to look at Google after all. Now the point of that is, it doesn't foul up Google's servers. It's just like in a million other connections on a cell phone or something that are interrupted, but it means it's actually very easy to penetrate the firewall. It's very easy to set up pages that will not be stopped by the firewall. So their firewall is very leaky, but it does block it. It's sort of like a porn filter in a high school. You know that those students can pretty easily get past it, but it stops people who aren't trying from getting through. But there are other countries that have like a bunch of ISPs like America. If America wanted to block some site in Europe, I don't think they'd have the technical ability. That's why there was a huge issue of the kill switch when Obama wanted to have it. We have a whole bunch of ISPs, and they each have their own pipe out of the country, and the government has neither the technical ability nor the legal authority to censor it, so you couldn't censor a site from in America. In order to make it censorable, you would have to somehow force them to go through one place and control it. Yeah.
Wouldn't you basically have to cut the fiber links under the ocean if you wanted to stop it? I mean, you could get out through Canada, you could get out through a satellite, you could get out through Mexico.
Yeah, that's the point. There are many ways out, and you would have to somehow block them all. So usually what you do in nations that really want to control this is you legally force them all to use your official government ISP, and then you control it. But yes, that's why a country, if you really want to censor the internet, you really have to force it to go through one point. Anyway, so in 2002, these attacks did not bring down the internet for two reasons. In the first place, the root DNS servers are over-provisioned. This is the most common defense against attacks. If you have a server that's expecting 1 megabit per second of normal traffic, you make one that can handle 100 megabits per second of traffic, so it can do far more than it needs to do. And so people will have to give a lot of useless traffic to waste all the bandwidth. And another one is this attack was short. And as we'll see, even if you brought down the DNS root for 1 hour, it wouldn't make any difference to anyone because the intermediate caches store that information for up to a day. So most people would not need to use the root for a day. Now, in 2007, 6 root servers were attacked, and only 2 of them were affected. And this is because they were the ones that did not yet have anycast. There are 4 kinds of traffic on the internet. There's unicast, which is one source to one destination, which is by far the most common. Then there is multicast, which is one sender to a group of destinations, which is not used much on the internet, but it's used for things like routing table updates on local area networks. And then there is broadcast, which is one source to every machine that can hear it, which is used only on local area networks for things like DHCP when you first boot up your laptop to get an address. And then there's anycast, where you have many servers dispersed around the whole world with the same IP address. And when you send a packet to a server, it hunts for the nearest one with that IP address. So if I go to that server, I find one in San Jose. If somebody in China goes to it, they find a server in China. That's anycast. And that means you cannot attack one server. If you take over a botnet of machines and you send a bunch of traffic to one IP address, it doesn't go to one server. It goes to a whole bunch of local servers with the same address. And there is no address you can give it that addresses just one server, so it smears out attacks. So you can't take any of it down until you can take it all down. it kind of takes the amplification that botnets have and it lets the defenders have their own botnet of servers. Yeah.
Is this similar to the attack that recently happened 3 months ago, where there was ransomware and some affiliated IT network engineer actually read the code, found the website,
Yeah.
and by registering the website, stopped the attack?
Yeah, okay, that's the WannaCry attack, and we'll get there. We're not there yet. That was not Anycast, but we're in fact getting there. That was an important one.
Would it be broadcast then?
What's that?
What was that? Was it broadcast?
That was Unicast. The malware would phone home to that domain name, and the domain name was in fact Unicast, which is what most of them are. Only the very larger networks use Anycast. Anycast is complicated and expensive to set up. Large networks do, like Cloudflare, which is a content provider that has servers everywhere that serve up pages. And huge networks like Google and Yahoo, most servers don't use this technique. But the roots of DNS servers do use it, and it makes it almost impossible to bring them down. So here's some graphs of this. You can see the attack. All these red dots in this period for an hour showed a whole lot of extra traffic going to those root servers, but they did not bring them down. So let's talk about the structure of DNS and what the root servers do. The root servers just have information about the top-level domains. And the top-level domains are .com, .net, .edu, and the other ones like .mil and .org. Just the part after the last dot, the end of a domain name. So root tells you where you can learn about .coms. So you'll ask root, I have a .com address, where is it? They say, well, you better ask the .com server, which is here. The .com server, well, if it's ccsf.edu, you'll ask the edu server, and it will tell you where ccsf.edu's DNS server is, and you can ask that where, say, ns3.csf.edu is, and go down here. So if you had a computer network that had no previous information, you just rebooted your whole network, you would do it in this fashion. You would go up here to find out where .edu was, go here to find out where ccsf.edu is, and go here to find the name server for CCSF, which will then help you find things like www.ccsf.edu. That's the ultimate origin of all the information. So you can do this live with the trace option. Let me give it a shot here. Since I have a Mac, which is Unix-based, I can do this directly. On a PC, you don't have the dig command unless you install it, so it's a little more annoying. So if I go here, let me make this big. All right, and make it big like this. Okay, I can dig ccsf.edu. Dig does a DNS resolution. So this will find ccsf.edu, and it finds its IP address, which is here, 147.144.1.212. It's an A record, which is an IP version 4 address, which is usually what you want. And it tells me what the server is. The server is 10.1.0.254 on port 53. That's our local City College DNS server. And normal DNS requests and responses go on port 53. Here, let me make that go to the top part of the screen to be less hard to see in the back. I should be able to do this. Let's see. Maybe I got to hit this. Ah, there we are. All right. Let me do that. All right, try to make it as easy to see as I can. All right, so now let's do that same thing with a trace, plus trace. Okay, now it's going to do the entire resolution without assuming anything. So the first thing it's going to do is go to the root servers, and there they are. They're named things like B-rootserver.net, C-rootservers.net, and in the tree of DNS, they call this dot. You ask dot where .edu is. It tells me that .edu is down here at these edu servers. So these are the 13 root servers I've been talking about. And what they have is where the top-level domains are. These are the .net servers. It told me you can go to these ones, so it goes to one of them, and one of them tells it where the City College name servers are. And here it is, ns3.ccsf.edu, and then it asks that server, and that server tells it this address. So I find it, and that's the process, making no assumptions, to reproduce the entire chain. 4 steps, 4 queries to 4 different servers, and I found where the City College website is. All right. So, in fact, now here's where this question came up. If somebody were to freeze the root servers or make them crash, what would happen? And the answer is nothing. Because Every part of this system caches data. So the EDU remembers where these other things are. And so if I'm down here going to a website, I will ask my local server to go there. And if another client goes to the same place, it will ask my local server, and my local server will not ask anybody else. It will just remember. Somebody asked this question a minute ago. I know the answer. I'll just repeat the same old answer. Now, caching means that the whole system responds faster. It takes less traffic. But it also means sometimes the data you get is out of date. If somebody moved the server and changed the information somewhere else, your local copy won't be updated right away. But that's how the internet works. These are resolvers, and they cache information. There's a chair there if you want it. Ain't no need to stand. Anyway, so that means in the first place, the cache could just happen to be out of date. But another thing that could happen is it's possible that due to some kind of error, you're able to put false information in the cache. And in fact, this happens quite a lot. And that means you can redirect traffic by putting lies about DNS resolutions. And one big attack happened in 2005. What happens is it depends on which server you poison, but typically you poison, say, a server at one internet service provider, and you're able to use that ISP to, all the customers of that ISP have their traffic misdirected. Dan Kaminsky found a gigantic vulnerability in DNS. This made him the most famous hacker in the world. He arguably still is, ethical hackers. He found a flaw in the DNS protocol. It was not a bug in one piece of software. It was a fundamental flaw in the entire protocol, so that you were able to poison the cache of any DNS server that obeyed the rules, because you can update the information in a DNS server. And if you do that, the only way it can tell that you are the authorized server is from a transaction ID, and that number is only 16 bits long. So there are only 65,000 possibilities. And people thought that would be fine because it would take a long time to use 65,000 guesses, but Dan found a clever trick that lets him make 500 guesses at a time. So it doesn't take that long at all to try all 65,000, and he was able to poison servers anywhere on the internet. And this is an example of the most successful kind of ethical hacking. He found this, and he successfully contacted all the huge companies like Microsoft to get them to patch their stuff, and got them to patch it all in secret before it became public. So nobody actually got hurt from this to any large extent, whereas the entire internet could have been fouled up. He managed to reach the right people and get their attention and fix it without leaking. And that's rare. Usually things turn out much worse. For example, the Heartbleed attack, which came out much later, exposed all the HTTPS servers in the world, and in fact, very few of them were updated in time. Yeah?
Is there any legal ramifications for, I mean, Dan obviously did the right thing, but when you have people that are telling the Washington Post before they tell Microsoft that there's a patch, are there ramifications?
This is a very good question. The question of responsible disclosure. I'm just repeating for the streaming, because are there ethical or legal ramifications if you just dump things publicly without warning the company first? This is a huge issue. What my lawyer has told me is that if you are in America, then you are completely okay by the First Amendment as long as there is any good in what you do. The only kind of speech that's forbidden in America is yelling fire in a crowded theater. The standard is if what you're saying is completely harmful and does no good, then it's forbidden. But you can always say, I released the vulnerability so the customers will know their stuff is vulnerable and there's some good side to it. And therefore, as long as there's any reasonable argument that there's some benefit to what you're saying, it is okay if what you say does harm and benefit. I must say, this is very important to me because I do this all the time. I've contacted something like 500 companies about security vulnerabilities, and I can tell you that almost all of them completely ignore the report and do nothing, and they won't even reply at all. Very few of them fix it, and about 1% of them try to silence me with legal attacks. There's always someone screaming at the college that I must be fired immediately or locked up or something for daring to find their vulnerabilities. So people have argued back and forth greatly about this. In my opinion, responsible disclosure is a complete waste of time. However, it does serve a social benefit. The point is, I know that there's no point telling companies about anything because they just don't care. There are very few exceptions, and Microsoft is one of them. When I had a Microsoft problem, I was able to immediately reach the right people within a couple days, and they gave me an intelligent answer. Microsoft has suffered through years of ignoring security problems until they have finally woken up and said they're really going to take them seriously. Very few companies have reached that point. Most of them have no clue. So when I found the Staples Android app is junk, It stores your password on your phone in an unsafe manner. So I contacted Staples and told them, and they completely ignored me like they always do. So then I made a YouTube video stealing the password off my Staples app, and they ignored me. So I gave it to my homework to my students, stealing my password from my Staples account. And then I gave my students homework stealing my credit card number from my Staples account. And that finally annoyed them. Then I went to talk to Washington, D.C. at a conference about it, and that finally annoyed them enough that they passed it. They never talked to me, however. Then they sent me a letter saying you should take down all those videos because now they're just harming people. And I asked my lawyer, and he said, you don't need to take them down. So I didn't. But the point is, I do responsible disclosure, not because I think it is of any value, because I know these companies don't care and won't fix it, but because it protects the reputation of the college. If I just released things without warning the company, I would get the reputation as an irresponsible cowboy, and the college would have a reputation of supporting nasty, mean hackers that degrade the world. So as a sort of ritual, like the ritual prayer before the meal, I tell them and wait 30 days and then dump it publicly, which is now accepted as more or less a standard thing to do. And of course, in one time out of 100 or 2 out of 100, they actually talk to me. But the rest just throw away the report and don't fix their stuff, and they turn it into homework or demonstrations at conferences or something. And some of them are eventually pressured into fixing it, perhaps 20%, and the rest just leave their junk broken because their customers don't know and nobody cares. This is a huge one. If you're any kind of activist in the world, you find out something bad, you tell the world, you expect them to care, and it's always sort of horrible when you find out how much nobody cares. They're living their life. You might get a headline, but next week something else happens and your outrage has no further effect. And this is the way life is. You can't change the status quo easily in security or anywhere else. Yeah.
Might be jumping the gun, but if they don't listen to people that have found this on their own, how effective do you think the red team, blue team, white team exercises are within their own company?
Well, if you say how effective are the red, white, and blue team exercises, obviously these companies don't have any. It's abundantly obvious that Staples has no security review at any level of their product, and this is, as far as I can tell, true of almost every company. They just hire the cheapest company to make their app. They don't test it at all except to see that it works as intended. No security control is ever tested, and off it goes. And they won't have any security testing until there's enough customers screaming to make them concerned. And what I do is I do the same thing other activists do. I humiliate them more and more and more publicly. I told Microsoft about a vulnerability and they ignored me. Well, they talked to me. They said, yes, we know about it. It doesn't matter. We're not going to fix it. And I said, I think it matters. And after I demonstrated at conferences and then went to DEF CON and killed their latest version of their operating system dead in 10 seconds on stage before 2,000 people. And then the Microsoft engineer in the front row texted me, what was that? Then they fixed it. You just have to humiliate them enough that they care, and then they'll fix it. But to be fair, there are thousands of problems with Windows, and they know about it, and they can't fix them all, and they have their priority chart. They fix this one, these other ones, they say they really aren't worth the bother. And, who am I to tell them what their priorities should be? I can't tell them that, but what I can do is the ones I've ethically, responsibly disclosed, I can use as demonstrations and homework, which is what I do. It just makes things more fun, but it also creates an entertaining bunch of people screaming at the college that I must be fired immediately for daring to expose their problems. And I've gotten used to that. First few times people threaten to sue you, it bothers you, then you get used to it. Yeah.
Is patching difficult?
Yes. Is actually patching difficult? That's the problem. Patching an app is often very difficult. Patching a single Android app is probably pretty easy. For Microsoft to patch something in Windows is huge because they have so many other services depending on everything. So if they were to change anything significant, like the appalling way they store passwords, which is god-awful, by the way, they would have to change a lot of other things along with it. And undoubtedly mistakes would be made and it would cause trouble. So it's expensive, time-consuming, and difficult to patch things. And that's why companies would just prefer to silence the person complaining and carry on. Anyway, these are all good questions. Here's another one. The Hangout DNS Changer was an attack that would infect your machine and it would change your local DNS settings so your machine uses a different server for DNS, one under the control of the attacker. So now the attacker can change the records on that server to anything they want. So what they do is infect machines until they've got enough victims, then change something like the address for Bank of America to go to a fake Bank of America site instead of the real one to get your password and steal your money or something of that sort. And that's called farming, where they don't. Phishing is when they send you an email and there's a link, and when you click on the link, bang, they get something bad like your password. Farming is where I infect your machine, but I do no harm today. I just plant a seed which will grow and mean I make money later. And that's what this does. It puts me in control of your traffic so I can, in the future, redirect your traffic in a way that will cause me to steal something valuable from you without hurting you right away. So let's see if I can, this looks good. All right, this is CNIT 40. Right, so what you do, you go, let me start this one, there. Okay, it is loading. I'm going to do player versus player. Is it ready or what? Come on. Okay, classic. Okay, so go to Kahoot.it, and there's a code you type in. There. Go to Kahoot.it and type in that code. And it'll tell me good 2 people have made it. A bunch of people join. You'll just have a bunch of questions to answer here, and it records whether you get it right and how quickly you get it right, and you win. You get points based on that information. So it's a video game of sorts, and it tends to keep people awake. That's the idea. I learned about this at Cyber Patriot, which is an Air Force program for high school students. I think we got enough people joined. I'm going to start the game. Oh, here's 37. I'll wait another 10 seconds to see if I get more, but 37 is pretty good. All right, let's try this thing. Okay, here we go. There's a question, and you have 4 choices to answer. Okay, what would the end user notice if your local DNS resolver went down for an hour? So here's your choices. Move it up on the screen. If I can. Apparently I can't. Whoa, pardon me. Apparently it has to be down there. All right, it will tell me. So the whole internet will be unavailable because their local resolver is down. 5 people got that. All right. And here's the winner, Chris Ash. Good, good. All right. So here's another one. What attack made Dan Kaminsky famous? Off we go. All right. Good. Looks like most people got that right. All right. David's the winner. Let's carry on. Now, this is someone, that's a good test. Try SQL injection on Kahoot. All right. How many servers will be queried by that command? That's not right. You can see whoever made these questions is kind of an idiot, but that's all right. Okay, 1 is the right answer. Good. David's still up there. Okay. Read the right answer every time. I'm getting a bad feeling. I may have made a mistake here. Anyway, such is life. Okay, how many queries or servers are queried by this one? I think I've failed to turn on a randomizer. That's not good.
Yeah.
Clearly, I had some technical difficulties with this. These things are only worth extra credit, by the way, which is part of how I cover my many mistakes. Anyway, all right. Yeah. I think, oh, there's another one. Okay. If the DNS root servers went down for an hour. Yeah, I'm going to stop after this one because I've detected enough failures in my system. What? It's, yes, the failure to randomize the answer is a pretty serious flaw. So I'm going to stop at this one, and I'll try and figure out how to randomize the next one. Anyway, there's another one coming up. I will make a recording of the winners. Yeah.
With the D command, I just saw 1, not 17. How is?
No, how many servers there are? There's 13.
No, the D command, DCCSF.
Dig will only query 1 server. That's right. But if you put the plus trace, it will query 4.
But the answers were 17 and 10.
No, I don't think so.
No?
Answers. Yeah.
There's 2 4s.
No, the right answer was 1.
Fine.
Yeah. So I'm just going to record who won this, and the next one I will hopefully improve my ability to, how do I show any game that would do it, and get results. Oh, good. All right, Greg, David, and Em are the winners. You guys get extra credit. I will put it here, Kahoot. All right, DNS can assist attacks, and this is the one that was already brought up a couple times by questions, very well. Okay, so this attack was very scary. It moved us up into the world of really killing people with malware, which is something we've only talked about before, and a lot of people can be blamed for this. So the NSA developed attacks against Windows and didn't tell Microsoft, so they existed. The Russians stole it from the NSA and leaked it, but somebody warned Microsoft and they put out a patch. However, when Microsoft puts out a patch, not everybody installs the patch. So a bunch of hospitals in Europe did not install the patch. Yeah.
This was because people didn't want to leave XP behind, right? I mean,
Well, that's
90% of it.
That's another issue. You're right. In addition, when Microsoft brings out new versions like to replace XP, again, people don't update right away, which is not just because they're stupid, it's because it's expensive and they have equipment that's built in XP. Let me see if I can somehow get this thing to stay attached to me. All right. Anyway, so hospitals all across England had to divert emergency patients because their machines were infected with malware, which will now say you can't use this machine until you pay the ransom. All right, so this guy stopped it accidentally. This is his name was Malware Check, was his online name. He got a sample of the malware by asking his friends, do you have it? Somebody sent it to him. He ran it in a virtual machine and saw that it made a network request to try to resolve a domain. The domain was not registered, so he registered it. And it turned out that that domain being registered turned off the malware. Now, nobody knows why. This was probably some test version of it or something. But the result was it infected hospitals in Britain, but before business hours came up in the United States, it was turned off. So he saved probably many lives in America because the hospitals here and major businesses did not get infected. And everybody had enough warning to rush and put on those patches or do other countermeasures. So that was a pretty cool thing. So he was a hero, and he came to DEF CON to give a talk about this. The British government knew that America wanted to prosecute him for other crimes, and they didn't warn him and let him come here so they wouldn't have to battle about extradition later. Here's one of the many problems with cybercrime law. America, like most other things, Americans love to lock people up for many, many years. So the punishment for cybercrime here is extreme. Ross Ulbricht got life in prison. So did, he ran Silk Road. So did the head of LulzSec. He got either, I think, 20 years or life. In Britain, they get small sentences like 1 year, and they won't extradite him to America where they face much more ruthless punishment. Anyway, so he came to America when he was talking at DEF CON, and when he tried to take his flight back, the FBI nabbed him, and they're holding him. They're accusing him of selling banking malware years before. And now people are arguing about whether he really did that or whether that was just a research project, and the truth has not really come out yet. Yeah?
Would it have been differently if he was an American? Would he have more rights?
Well, that's a very interesting question. The question is, would he have more rights if he was an American? Certainly when he got to court, he would have more rights in terms of search and seizure and search warrants than he will as a foreigner. So I suspect it would affect his trial. But I don't think it'll affect him now that we got him in America. The main protection he would have is if we didn't catch him in America, Britain would probably refuse to extradite him because they have refused to extradite several other famous hackers that hacked American stuff. Because the position in Britain is that these people suffer from mental disorders like Asperger's, and it really is improper for them to get the kind of punishment they would get over here. Anyway, so dynamic DNS is a system that lets you put a website on your home computer. Your home computer has an IP address that changes periodically, and with dynamic DNS, you go to a server that redirects it to where your machine is. So this permits the address of a domain name to change more rapidly, and that is beneficial to people that want to host websites with cheap home internet accounts, but it can be abused by criminals who want to hide their command and control servers. Now, instead of having a hard-coded IP address, see, malware typically has to phone home to a control server. You could have malware that just erases the hard drive and kills machines, and that's fine. But if you want to make money, you typically want to have bots that you can control and then give them orders to go attack on a site or something. So you want them to stay running and to connect to a control server. Now, some malware uses hard-coded IP addresses, but the problem is pretty soon somebody, a malware researcher, runs it, finds the IP address, then they contact the ISP and take it down, and then your malware quits working, like WannaCry. That's a weakness of it. So to prevent that, you use a domain name, and then you keep moving the address, the server where the domain name is around, and that way, even if people find it and get people to take it down, you just move it to another one so your botnet keeps working. And there's fast flux DNS. You can make a special DNS server that uses very short cache times so you can update it very quickly, like every few seconds, so that nobody can ever figure out which one of the servers it's on. And there's another thing people do to hide their command and control servers so you can't take them down. Now, another attack that's assisted, so that's a way in which DNS is used to make crime work better, make other attacks work. Here's another one. This is the original packet amplification attack, was pings. You used to be able to ping broadcast addresses over the internet. So you could be somewhere off campus and you could send a packet to the broadcast address for City College. It would go to our main switch. It would go to every computer on campus. Every one of them would reply. So you could send one request and get 1,000 replies. And since ping does not use a handshake, you could lie about the from address and put your victim's from address here. So all those replies go down here. So you can multiply your bandwidth by a large factor, like 1,000. So if you have 1 megabit per second, your target gets hit by 1,000 megabits per second. And not only that, they will blame City College for attacking them, because none of those packets have a from address from the actual original attacker. This was the Smurf attack. That one was blocked by ending broadcast traffic on the internet. You can no longer send broadcast packets over the internet to a remote site. But DNS amplification still works because you can send a request to a server and you get a reply, and the reply is often much bigger than the request. So it leads to a degree of amplification. You don't get 1,000 times, but you can get pretty good amplification. If you do a dig any of yahoo.com, I send this small request and I get this reply that's about 500 bytes big, listing all the information about Yahoo's servers. So the request is 69 bytes, the reply is 379 bytes. So that's an amplification of 5.5 times. Yeah.
Was that command prompt or PowerShell that you sent that code?
That's a Unix command prompt where I did that.
Unix.
You can't do it in PowerShell unless you install the dig command, which is an optional command. And so here I do it. Now, if you do the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, which is responsible for the technical specifications of the internet, and dig there, you will get a very large response. Not only do you get a list of addresses, you get these long random numbers, and we'll get to those later. Those are DNSSEC codes. DNSSEC puts cryptographic signatures on DNS responses so you know they're authentic. And they make traffic more secure, but they also make it much bigger. So you get a much larger degree of amplification for sites that are using this security measure. And as you see here, a 28-byte request turns into a 4,000-byte response, so that's 45 times. But it can't deliver that over UDP, so it actually moves via TCP, and therefore is not as easy to use for a packet amplification attack, but it does greatly amplify traffic. As we decided to use things like DNSSEC, the original specification for DNS became obsolete. The original specification said that you can send up to 500 bytes of data. And that seemed like enough in the early days of the internet, but now that we want to send those big DNSSEC encryption data, it's not. So one extension is eDNS, which lets you send 4,096 bytes over UDP. And this would therefore be more valuable for an attacker, but it will be easier. UDP is much more efficient than TCP. It's faster. You can serve more clients per second over UDP because you don't have to bother with the handshake. Anyway, then you can use DNS as a conduit of the attack. The CNIT Trojan would use traffic on port 53 to reach the command and control center because everybody has to let traffic on port 53 go out, or people can't use external DNS servers, which, by the way, is not a bad idea, to force everyone in your company to use your company's one official DNS server instead of being able to use off-site DNS servers. That's not a bad idea, but a lot of people don't do it, so external port 53 traffic typically gets through. Anyway, another thing you can do is detect malicious activity here. Machines that are infected and bots typically send a lot of DNS queries. And so you can just look at how many DNS queries machines are sending. A lot of machines do things like Configure. They have a pseudo-random list of domains it will try because people kept finding the command and control server and taking it down. So Configure had like thousands of them. It would try all these until it found one that was up. So Microsoft actually had to buy something like 1,000 new domains every day to stay ahead of Configure. But this means it has to do a whole lot of DNS requests hunting for its command and control server on the internet. And you can spot it here. Here's the DNS requests per hour for bots and for normal machines. So infected bots may be easy to spot by their unusual DNS traffic. You can use DNS servers that protect your network by blocking DNS from malicious domains. And OpenDNS is a free service that does this. If you just change your resolvers to the OpenDNS address, then if someone tries to open an email attachment or something that tries to call a known malicious server, this will block it. It's a simple security measure. And you can then, if you pay an account, you can actually have other things like block adult sites and games and stuff and keep track of what people are doing. But for free, you can block malicious sites this way. It's a simple security measure. And it's very powerful. It uses Anycast, and you can enforce other rules. The Stormworm used a distributed command and control center, and it used fast flux DNS to move the traffic around among many servers, so it was very difficult for someone to find and take down the command and control server. Another use of DNS to facilitate an attack. Microsoft has begun taking down these servers by buying the domains and taking over the servers and taking over the botnets, which was of questionable legality, but now it's been going on for several years. Microsoft has gotten pretty good at getting court orders that give them the right to put up a server to take control of infected machines, which you might think would be illegal, but they've learned how to phrase this correctly to get judges to sign off on that. Unfortunately, Microsoft has frequently taken down servers that were in fact other researchers' servers to control the same botnet, so the various good guys trying to fight them often are shooting each other instead of the bad guy. That's the kind of thing you'll get from a lack of coordination. Anyway, but another big issue about DNS is its general miserable structure. DNS queries go over your network with no encryption, no password, no signature, so you have no way to know that the replies are genuine, and you have no way to protect your privacy. So I just teaching escapee class, and you can write a Python class. This is the entire script for a DNS monitoring script in Python. All you have to run is that, and it will then tell you everything everyone does on your network. This person went to Yahoo, this person went somewhere else. So if you want to know, I had a student come to me and say, I'm the network administrator, and somebody at my company is going to forbidden websites at work. And how do I catch them? And I say, all you do is this, and you get when they went there, exactly who it was, and where they went. It's easy as pie. And people do it all the time. Monitoring DNS is a simple way to know what people are doing. Yeah.
Will we have copies of these if we go to your website later?
Yeah, they're all on my website at samsclass.info. Good. The slides are there. So anyway, this is an intrinsic protocol weakness. It was designed when all they were trying to do is make it work, and nobody was thinking about privacy or hacking. They just wanted the request to somehow reach the DNS server and get a response. So anybody can modify the responses. Anyone on your network can just listen and send false replies out about DNS, and your machine will just believe it because it has no signature or anything to identify the authentic DNS resolver. If your DNS server is taken down, then of course your website goes down and you lose money. You can modify DNS to do nasty things like send spam, drive people to phishing sites and steal their passwords, and so on. And then there's cyber war, which often uses DNS spoofing, among other things. This is a big thing now. America's in the middle of experiencing a serious cyber war attack from Russia. They attacked our election. They did it very effectively. They had thousands of botnets, thousands of Twitter-generating bots, which they used to pump social media to promote the Donald Trump campaign and to create the current situation where there's a huge division in America and people have lost faith in democracy. That is exactly what they wanted to accomplish, and they did it, and they continue to do it to pump up fake news sites and such. They are very effectively engaging in war against us, and I don't see any way to stop it right away because our president wants to deny that it's happening. So it is, but we are currently getting the same cyber war attacks that Russia used against Estonia. They are the experts at this. And right now they are just wreaking havoc in America. And you can see the results in the riots in the street and stuff as they are successfully undermining our government. Yeah.
I noticed unlike other colleges, you actually list your Twitter account where we
Yeah.
find a lot of our stuff for CNIT.
Yeah.
I assume that, like, obviously the college is behind you in
Oh, no.
providing this
Oh,
and posting your Twitter, which
no, not at all. They would like me to shut up, but they can't do anything.
I like it, honestly.
Yeah, you should, by the way, you should all join Twitter. The whole security community happens on Twitter. That you can meet the criminals and the researchers and the companies and everybody. The security community thrives on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, you're missing out. Anyway, I'm glad you mentioned it. I got a few more Kahoots. Connect, go to Kahoot.it, and there's the number, which might be different than last time, I'm not sure. I think it's a different random number every time. So if you didn't bring a computer or a smartphone, please bring one next time, obviously. And the cool thing about this is even the people that join remotely by live stream can do it. So that's why I discarded a previous technology called iClickers and switched to this. This is better. Good, 32 players. I'll wait a few more seconds to see if any more are coming. Okay, they're coming. Okay, I'm about to start. Off we go, 6 questions, okay. Okay. Techniques as possible. Link the name to a portable device. Okay. Okay, good. This looks all right. Oh, you probably can't, yeah, because it times you. Yeah, that's right. Yes, that is important. You can't change your answer. So the 12 is, blue is the right answer. DDNS is dynamic DNS. All right, so Dennis is the winner so far. Let's go ahead. The technique makes packet floods stronger. Okay, and that's DRDoS for Distributed Reflected Denial of Service. Kenny is the winner now. Okay, larger DNS over UDP. All right, that's it, eDNS. Good, the most popular answer is correct. Which security measure will block access to malicious server? Okay, that's it, OpenDNS. And I guess that's it. So these are the winners, E, Bill, and Kenny. And I'll take AE also. So we'll have more of those coming up. Those are worth extra credit. But all right, so that's it for the lecture. You'll find the slides down here. And the homeworks start being done. Oh, in order to do the homework, you probably want to use some virtual machines. You can download them here, and for that there is a name and password you need, which I'm going to, so why don't you stop the recording, because I don't want to put this out over the internet. Everybody will download my virtual machine. So supposedly this will be removed from the recording. Here's the name and password to get it.